Greetings, my fellow philosophical thinkers. L3's News Podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful swampy Memphis, South Florida. And today's date is Thursday, June 20th, 2019. So, let us begin. Thanks for tuning in, my friends. Hopefully everyone's having a good day. Summer solstice should be tomorrow, which is all well and good. And for the folks in the southern hemisphere, winter solstice. Alright, well, just to let you know, I am at Cafe Collective located at 100 North Federal Highway, Suite C4-3 in the heart of downtown Fort Lauderdale, which is actually the facility itself is on Broward Boulevard and Northeast 7th Avenue, hopefully I'm correct, in the southern west and southwest end of Victoria Park. Oh yeah, so just you hear some music in the background. People are a little mellowed out. We got some events coming up. Just hit the website on Facebook and all that. They'll give you plenty of information. So, I'll mainly be talking about a couple of articles about Scott Israel's Senate hearing. And there's some, of course, controversial rhetoric that's going around. And I'm not going to say that he is guilty or responsible to an extent, which I have to say, yes, I do. I'm not going to lie about it. But now he may have to convince the Senate. So he still believes it's a political game. And of course, there is a claim that Ron DeSantis made a statement on why he's still fighting this. So their attorney's actually trying to refute that. However, the special master said, nope, it's not going to influence us by any means, just the information that's provided. Which, that's the right thing to do. And everyone knows that I am not fond of Scott Israel's actions. Especially when he was a member of Homeland Security when he bragged about that in his 2008 campaign. Major conflict of interest. Well, like I said before, his witch-hunting rhetoric, politicizing, instead of being compensated with peace, got him in this bind. And, of course, I said to everyone in my past episodes, he has the right to be heard by the Senate. And to be very frank, I don't know why he took it to the courts first. In my honest viewpoint, that was a mistake. Should have went to the internal remedies first, then take it to the courts. So I don't know what the attorney was thinking. Looks like he's trying to find a way of bone dragging it. So, without further ado, I'm going to be hitting a couple articles from FloridaPolitics.com. This one came out actually a couple of days ago about suspended Broward Sheriff Scott Israel pushes back against Ron DeSantis at final hearing. And the quote says here, I've never been called incompetent. I've never been called negligent. It is by Ryan Nicole. As it reads here, suspended Sheriff Scott Israel defended his tenure leading the Broward Sheriff's Office, BSO, at Tuesday hearing that will help decide his fate in that role. Israel testified for more than 90 minutes at a proceeding overseen by lawyer and former lawmaker Dudley Goodlatte, who was assigned by Senate President Bill Galvano to review the case. Israel's testimony will continue Wednesday morning. Following the hearing's conclusion, Goodlatte, the special master in the case, will send a recommendation to the Senate, which will make a final determination of whether to terminate Israel or reinstate him as sheriff. Governor Ron DeSantis suspended Governor Ron DeSantis suspended Israel back in January, citing BSO's handling of the Parkland shooting and the Fort Lauderdale airport shooting. What they both have in common? Firearm-free zones, by law. I will continue on here. Israel's attorney Ben Kuna pushed back against claims by DeSantis that Israel failed in his statutory role as a conversator of the peace. He fulfilled that standard of competence and attention. He exercised his duties, and it is for the people of Broward County to decide who is their elected sheriff, Kuna argued Tuesday. It is not for the governor to, for reasons not based on fact, try to implement a narrow constitutional provision to take over the job of the electors in Broward County. That's what I call suspended. It's temporary. Well, I'll continue on here. Attorneys for DeSantis have pointed out to the report from the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Commission, which is links on this article, you folks could read for yourself, which found failings in the reaction to the shooting of Broward Deputy Scott Peterson. Peterson was a school resource officer for the high school on the day of the shooting. He recently was criminally charged with failing to confront the shooter. As for the Fort Lauderdale airport shooting, DeSantis Deputy General Counsel John McAlver pointed to chaos that ensued during the response to the 2017 attack, asserting that the BSO was not properly prepared. But Israel and other defense witnesses defended the agency's response and argued any chaos was due to the 15 to 20,000 people present at the airport that day. Ultimately, Israel said his role was not to prevent crime altogether. That's not what a conversator of the peace means to me and others, sheriffs, Israel said. It means giving your best single day to take a proactive approach instead of reactive approach to law enforcement. So what I'm looking at here, that little quote he stated, is using that sovereign immunity tort liability law, which is a Florida Statute 768.28. I'll continue on here. Kuna also attempted to hint at framing the suspension as a political decision. DeSantis, a Republican, said during his run for governor that he will push to suspend Israel if elected. Israel is a Democrat. And the funny thing about that, folks, a lot of people I know who are registered Democrats can't stand Scott Israel. But I'll continue on here, including some of the victims' heirs. I'll continue on here. Do you consider yourself, in the time you've been sheriff, to be a sheriff or a politician? Kuna asked Israel. A sheriff, Israel responded. But part of your role as an elected official to involve yourself in political matters, Kuna noted. Most certainly, Israel replied. Kuna also honed in on the training efforts mandated by BSO, arguing that the agency did everything they could to prepare for an event such as the Parkland shooting. That attack resulted in 17 people killed, but Kuna argued Peterson's inaction was not foreseeable or the fault of the BSO. Nothing in this personnel file suggested the slightest inability not to only perform the duties of a sworn deputy, but the additional duties and responsibilities of a school resource officer, Kuna said during his opening statement. It really dawns on me, to be very frank. Yes, he's a school resource officer, but who's he representing? The Broward Sheriff's Office. I will continue on here. The hearing process has previously begun back in February, but was postponed when Israel filed a lawsuit pushing for a reversal of his suspension. Gillette pushed to delay the Senate review to the conclusion of Israel's court challenge. In a fast-track decision, the Florida Supreme Court ruled against Israel. I've been called in some names in my time, Israel said near the end of his testimony Tuesday. But in my 63 years on earth, I've never been called incompetent. I've never been called negligent. I'm a hard-working, studious person who cares deeply about the community, and I know how incredibly serious it is. These hearings are about talking my livelihood away from me, but incompetent or negligent, no, sir. So, interesting there, some of his defensive rhetoric. There's a lot of people hate this man deliberately. I'm not one of them. I just would really have animosity on his actions as an overseer, elected servant of Broward County. Like I said before, his biggest error, greatest error, was politicizing, blaming gun owners, blaming the National Rifle Association. I don't care if you agree with the NRA or not. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. But when it comes to witch hunting, it will burn you in due time. People love this shit out, but hate receiving. And this is why, one of the reasons why I tell everyone in my county and out there, Scott Israel was never my sheriff. I don't like that game at all. I don't give a damn who you are, where you from, and what party you in. But if you're a member of Homeland Security and have a witch hunting fetish, I'm not afraid to call anyone out, including Mr. Israel. He burned a lot of bridges in his own institution and everyone else within Broward County, state of Florida, and beyond. I'm going to continue on here with this next article that came out the next day. Same thing by FloridaPolitics.com. Scott Israel grilled on Parkland attacks as he wraps testimony at suspension appeal hearing. The quote says here, "I'm responsible for all actions and inaction of every member of the agency." So, as an overseer, elected one to be exact, Ryan Nicole wrote this today. Scott Israel spent 7 hours in the witness chair Wednesday as a suspended Broward sheriff argues to be reinstated as head of the Broward Sheriff's Office. That follows a 90-minute block of testimony from Israel on Tuesday. Former lawmaker Dudley Gullett is overseeing the hearing as a special master. Gullett was assigned by Senate President Bill Gavano to preside over the proceedings and ultimately issued a recommendation to the Senate. That body will determine whether to terminate Israel or reinstate him as sheriff. Gullett's report is not to be expected until at least August. Israel began the day being questioned by his own attorney, Ben Kuna, regarding his role overseeing the shooting at Stoneman Douglas High School and the Fort Lauderdale Airport shooting by airport. Governor Ron DeSantis cited BSO's handling of both those attacks in the executive order suspending Israel. He spent a large portion of the day on the 2018 Parkland shooting, which resulted in 17 deaths and 17 more injuries. BSO Deputy Scott Peterson, who worked as a school resource officer at the high school that day, was recently arrested and charged for failing to confront the shooter during the attack. Going to ask Israel whether he had any reason to believe Peterson would not immediately enter the building based on the BSO training guidelines. Israel said he did not. Had I had that knowledge, he said, I would have removed him as a deputy. The issue was revisited on cross-examination as DeSantis attorney Nicholas Primrose pressed Israel on whether the department's active shooting training requirements were sufficient. Our deputies were receiving the appropriate training and they were receiving the right amount of training, Israel argued. But Primrose pushed back on the rate of those training sessions, which occurred every 3 years. It's your decision. You could have prioritized certain training more often, right? Primrose asked, and Israel replied, you could have prioritized certain trainings longer, make them more extensive trainings. Primrose responded, yes, Israel said. And could you have made the school resource officer do the active shooter training on a more frequent basis than just one every 3 years? Primrose asked. Yes, answered Israel. The suspended sheriff asserted that the active shooting training was not perishable, and that deputies were able to retain information from those sessions. But Primrose pointed to Peterson's failure to try to neutralize the shooter despite that training. Ultimately, Israel did state as sheriff he was responsible for Peterson's failing to enter the building. Here's what he says here. I was responsible for his inaction that day, Israel said, but Israel argued that his responsibility was manifested in ensuring Peterson faced the consequences. Israel stood by his earlier testimony that he could not have foreseen Peterson responding the way he did. As soon as I saw that video, being a tactical force officer myself, I suspended him, brought into an internal affairs investigation, and was ready to wait for the results and take action. Did I hear you correctly in saying that you are, in fact, responsible for his actions or inaction that day? Primrose responded, highlighting Israel's partial concession. As sheriff, I'm responsible for all the actions and inaction of every member of the agency, Israel said. Primrose later replayed a controversial interview Israel had with CNN's Jake Tapper back in 2018. In that interview, Israel said he had given the agency amazing leadership. He also seemed to shirk any responsibility for Peterson's actions whatsoever, telling Tapper, "It is not the responsibility of the general or the president if you have a deserter." Interesting there. So Israel rocked those remarks back on Wednesday. I don't think I've conveyed appropriately to the American public about responsibility. Of course, I take responsibility for everything that goes on in the agency, Israel said. What I meant to say, and didn't do it for a good job of it, was I'm responsible for everything. I didn't commit the overt acts. I will make sure that anyone who committed overt acts committed a crime, did something wrong, that I will make sure that his due diligence is met. Primrose also grilled Israel on reports showing BSO has encountered a Parkland shooter before, even receiving information that he planned to carry out a mass shooting. 2 deputies were punished but not fired after failing to document those reports properly. Israel said his agency's hands were tied and that even he had gotten the word of the potential threats made by eventual shooter Nicholas Cruz. No arrest could have been made, as Cruz had not yet committed a crime. He may have some solid points, but I'll continue on here. Solid points. I'll rephrase that. Solid points, but it still could have prevented when he entered that property. I'll continue on here. Primrose pressed Israel as to why the agency did not have a policy in place to send any reports of mass shootings straight up to the sheriff. I don't know of any agency in the United States of America who has that protocol in place, Israel responded. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow we had appropriate policies in place, and they were trained to do reports. And if those reports were serious enough, they would have gone up to the chain of command eventually to meet if need be. Israel ultimately said that should be reinstated. Should he be reinstated, he would seek to serve out the remainder of his term as Broward sheriff. If that's the Senate's will, I would fulfill my term, yes. Primrose closed his question of Israel by asking whether Israel believed in any way he was incompetent or neglected his duty while heading the BSO. Israel asserted he did not. The only singular person I've heard say that is your boss, Governor DeSantis. I've heard no one else say that, sir. Well, based on the articles, the video interviews, Scott Israel stepped in his own bear trap. And I say it symbolically. Should have thought about this really quick. Have everything arranged. However, based on the complaints, the criticisms, you could be distracted. However, like I said before, you gotta be persistent on your obligations. And he has flip-flopped. That was one of his big mistakes. And even if you read the executive order of from Ron DeSantis, they'll tell you all about the Florida statutes under Chapter 30, which is mainly about the sheriff or other elected servants. And one of the areas he did talk about was alleges in this document. So he didn't say he was guilty, but based on the information Governor DeSantis received from both reports of what occurred at the Fort Lauderdale Airport and Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And one of those areas should have been more vigilant. Even though I was reading some of the stuff in the report, the Stoneman Douglas Public Safety Commission report. A lot of the watchmen failed. They didn't fulfill their duties. Like I said, they saw Nicholas Cruz, one of them saw Nicholas Cruz walked in. He should have been stopped immediately. Period. But so the whole thing, so all I'm going to do, I'm definitely going to leave the Executive Order 19-14 on here, and plus a link for the video Senate hearings on the Broward County Sheriff, which is a part 1. And of course, you can get part 1 and 2 from both dates, the June 18th and June 19th. You can see it for its entirety, or just read or examine Scott Israel's testimony. So, like I said, my friends, when you're an elected servant, even in those positions, whether you're a governor, CEO, president of a labor organization, you're the overseer. That's what Scott Israel was. And based on the information, they say he did not fulfill them. That's the reason why he was suspended. And it was a memorable decision by Governor Ron DeSantis. And you folks know me pretty well. I have criticized him a few times. But what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. Well, the Senate's going to make a decision in August. Just wait and see the outcome. All right, so next one here will be the last one. It's mainly about, it's from John Whitehead for the Rutherford Institute. He has a commentary here. The Jackboots are coming. Mass arrest, power grabs, and politics of fear. Never has our future been more unpredictable. Never have we depended so much on political forces that cannot be trusted to follow the rules of common sense and self-interest. Forces that look like sheer insanity, if judged by the standards of other centuries. Hannah Arendt, The Origins of Totalitarianism. How do you persuade a populace to embrace totalitarianism? That goose-stepping form of tyranny in which the government has all the power and we the people have none. You persuade the people that the menace they face, imaginary or not, is so sinister, so overwhelming, so fearsome that the only way to surmount the danger is by empowering the government to take all necessary steps to quash it. Even if that means allowing government jackboots to trample all over the Constitution. This is how you use the politics to fear to persuade freedom-loving people to shackle themselves to a dictatorship. It works the same way every time. The government's overblown, extended wars on terrorism, drugs, violence, and illegal immigration have been convenient ruses used to terrorize the populace into relinquishing more of their freedoms in exchange for elusive promises of security. A wet dream, to be exact. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Case in point, on June 17th, the same day President Trump announced that the government would be making mass arrests in order to round up and forcibly remove millions of illegal immigrants, including families and children, from the country. The U.S. Supreme Court handed down a ruling, Gamble versus the United States, that placed the sovereignty, i.e. the supreme power authority of federal and state governments, over that of the citizenry, specifically as it relates to the government's ability to disregard the Constitution's double jeopardy clause. At first glance, the two incidences on relating to illegal immigration and the other to the government's prosecutorial powers don't have much to do with each other, and yet there's a common thread that binds them together. The common thread speaks to the nature of the government beast we have been saddled with, and how, with the views, the rights and sovereignty of we the people. Don't you hear a lot about sovereignty anymore? Sovereignty is a dusty, antiquated term that harkens back to an age when kings and emperors ruled with absolute power over the populace that had no rights. Americans turned away the idea of sovereignty on its head, and when they declared America their independence from Great Britain, and rejected the absolute authority of King George III. In doing so, Americans claimed for themselves the right to self-government and established themselves as the ultimate authority and power. In other words, in America, we the people, sovereign citizens, call the shots. So when the government acts, it is supposed to do at our bidding in our behalf because we are the rulers. That's not exactly how it turned out, though, is it? In the 200 plus years we boldly embarked on an experiment in self-government, we have been steadily losing ground to the government's brazen power grabs foisted upon us in the so-called name of national security. The government has knocked us off the rightful throne. It has usurped our rightful authority. It has staged the ultimate coup. Its agents no longer even pretend that they answer to we the people. So you see, two incidents on June 17th were not hugely significant in and of themselves. Trump's plan to carry out mass arrests of anyone the government suspects might be an illegal immigrant, and the Supreme Court's recognition that the government can sidestep the Constitution in the sake of expediency are merely more on the same abuses that have been heaped upon us in recent years. Yet these incidents speak volumes about how far our republic has fallen and how desensitized we the people have become to this constant undermining of our freedoms. How do we reconcile the founders' visions of our government as an entity whose only purpose is to serve the people, with the police state's insistence that the government is the supreme authority and that its powers trumps that of the people themselves, and that it may exercise that power in any way sees fit. That includes government agents crashing through doors, mass arrests, ethnic cleansing, racial profiling, indefinite detentions without due process, and internment camps. They cannot be reconciled. They are polar opposites. We are fast approaching a moment of reckoning where we will be forced to choose between the vision of what America was intended to be, a model for self-governance where power is invested in the people, and the reality of what she has become, a police state where power is vested in the government. This slide into totalitarianism helped along by over-criminalization, government surveillance, militarized police, neighbors turning into neighbors, privatized prisons, and forced labor camps. Name just a few similarities. It's tracking very closely in what happened in Germany in the years leading up to Hitler's rise to power. We are walking a dangerous path right now. The horrors of the Nazi concentration camps were kept secret from the German people. They were well publicized. As The Guardian reports, mass of ordinary Germans didn't know about evolving terror of Hitler's Holocaust. They knew concentration camps were full of Jewish people who were stigmatized as subhumans and race defilers. They knew that these, like other groups of minorities, were being killed out of hand. They knew that Adolf Hitler had repeatedly forecast the extermination of every Jew on German soil. They knew these details because they had read about them. They knew because the camps and the measures which led up to them had been prominently proud and reported step by step in thousands of officially inspired German media articles and posters. The reports in newspapers and magazines all over the country were phased in a public process of desensitization, which worked all too well, culminating in the killing of 6 million Jews. But you could say, based on R.J. Rummel and death by gun control, they say about roughly 20.5 million were slaughtered by the hand of the Third Reich. That's just an example of what happened in the 20th century genocide and democide. I will continue on here. Likewise, a mass of ordinary Americans are fully aware of the Trump administration's efforts to stigmatize and dehumanize any and all who do not fit with the government's plans for this country. These mass arrests of anyone suspected of being an illegal immigrant may well be shot across the bow. You see, it's a short hop, skip, and jump from allowing government agents to lock large swaths of the population up in detention centers until they can prove that they are not only illegal in the country, to empowering government agents to subject to anyone, citizen, non-citizen alike, to similar treatment until they can prove that they are in compliance with every statute and regulation on the books and not guilty of having committed some crime or other. It is no longer a matter of if, but when. You may be innocent of wrongdoing now, but when the standard for innocence is set up by the government, no one is safe. Everyone is a suspect, and anyone can be a criminal when it's the government determining what is a crime. Remember, the police state does not discriminate. At some point, once government has been given the power to do whatever it wants, the Constitution may be damned. It will not matter whether you're an illegal immigrant or a citizen by birth, a lawbreaker, or someone who marches in lockstep with the government dictates. Government jails will detain you just as easily whenever you've obeyed every law or broken a dozen, and government agents will treat you like a suspect, whether or not you've done anything wrong, simply because they've been trained to view and treat everyone like potential criminals. Eventually, all that will matter is whether some government agent, poorly trained, utterly ignorant of the Constitution, way too hyped up on the people, power of their badges, and authorized to detain, search, interrogate, threaten, and generally harass anyone they see fit, chooses to single you out for special treatment. We've been saying the same debate about the perils of government overreach for the past 50 plus years, and we don't seem to learn, or if we learn too late. Flush Papers 46 by James Madison is a good read, folks, so check it out. All of the excessive, abusive tactics employed by the government today, warrantless surveillance, stop and frisk searches, SWAT team raids, roadside strip searches, asset forfeiture schemes, private prisons, definite detention, militarized police, etc., started out as a seemingly well-meaning plan to address some problem in a society that needed a little extra help. Be careful what you wish for. You will get more than you bargain for, especially when the government's involved. Remember, nothing is ever as simple as the government claims it is. The war on drugs turned out to be the war on the American people, waged with SWAT teams and militarized police. The war on terror turned out to be the war on the American people, waged with warrantless surveillance and indefinite detention. The war on immigration out to be yet another war on the American people, waged with roving government agents demanding papers, please. Whatever dangerous practices you allow the government to carry out now, whether it's in the name of national security or protecting America's borders or making America great again, rest assured these same practices can and will be used against you when the government decides to set its sights on you. If you're inclined to advance this double standard because you believe you have done nothing wrong and have nothing to hide, beware, there's always a boomerang effect. As commentator Sean Kenny observed, what civil liberties are you willing to surrender in the apprehension of 12 million people? Knock and drags, detention centers, checkpoints, house-to-house searches, papers, please? Will the racially profiled folks to look, or are we talking about people of Chinese, Indian, Irish, Polish, Italian? People who might look like you, descent as well. If the federal government makes a 1% rounding error and accidentally deports an American citizen, that's 120,000 Americans. What means will be used to restore their rights? Who will remunerate them for their financial loss, restore their lost homes, personal property, families? What happens when these means are turned against some other group of undesirables in America by a president who does not share your political persuasion but can now justify the act based on previous justifications? We are all at risk. The law of reciprocity applies here. The flip side of that golden rule, which calls for us to treat others as we would have them treat us, is that we shouldn't inflict on others what we wouldn't want to suffer ourselves. In other words, if you don't want to be locked up in a prison cell or detention camp, if you don't want to be discriminated against because the color of your race, religion, politics, or anything else that sets you apart from the rest, if you don't want your loved ones shot at, strip searched, tasered, beaten, and treated like slaves, if you don't want to have to be constantly on guard against government eyes watching what you do, where you go, and what you say, if you don't want to be tortured, waterboarded, or forced to perform degrading acts, if you don't want your children to be forced to be separated from you, caged and lost, then don't allow these evils to be inflicted on anyone else. No matter how compelling the case the government makes for it, or how fervently you believe in the cause, you can't have it both ways. You can't live in a constitutional republic if you allow government to act like a police state. You can't claim the value of freedom if you allow the government to operate like a dictatorship. You can't expect to have your rights respected if you allow the government to treat whomever it pleases with disrespect and only disregard for the rule of law. Indeed, when the government is allowed to operate as a law unto itself, the rule of law itself becomes illegitimate. As Dr. Martin Luther King pointed out in his letter from a Birmingham jail, everything Adolf Hitler did in Germany was legal, and everything the Hungarian freedom fighters did in Hungary was illegal. It was illegal to aid and comfort a Jew in Hitler's Germany. In other words, there comes a time when law and order are in direct opposition to justice. Isn't that what the American Revolution was all about? Finally, if anyone suggests that the government's mass immigration roundup and arrest are just government doing its job to fight illegal immigration, don't buy it. This is not about legal immigration. It's about power and control. It's about testing the waters to see how far the American people will allow the government to go in reshaping the country in the image of a totalitarian police state. It's about the rise of an emergency state that justifies all manner of government misconduct and power grabs in the so-called name of national security. It's about how much tyranny we the people will tolerate before we find your conscience and your vote. It's about how far we allow the government to go in its effort to distract and divide us and turn into a fearful, easily controlled populace. Ultimately, it's about whatever we believe, as the founders did, that our freedoms are inherently ours and that the government is only as powerful as we allow it to be. Freedom does not flow from the government. It was not given to us to be taken away of the will of the state. The same way government's appointed purpose is not to threaten or undermine our freedoms, but to safeguard them. We must get that back to the ways of thinking if we are ever to stand on our ground and face the threats of those freedoms. As I make clear in my book, American Battlefield, The War on the American People, it's time to draw that line in the sand. The treatment being meted out to anyone that looks like an illegal immigrant is only the beginning. Eventually, we will all be the government's crosshairs for one reason or another. This is the start of the slippery slope. Martin Now Mueller understood this. A Lutheran minister who was imprisoned and executed for opposing Hitler's regime. Now Mueller warned. First, it came from the socialists. I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. The past is today's greatest teacher, my friends. And to be very frank, the origins of federalizing immigration officially started in 1891. And of course, Ellis Island was 1882. In addition, you can say this happened during the so-called Civil War, during the Lincoln's administration, around the 1860s. I think 1863, if I'm correct. Bringing the Irish in, have the men become instant citizens, and have them sign to join the Union Army. And now, we all know the illegal immigration is a problem. And a big issue on that aspect is human trafficking. That's a big industry, my friends. And illegal immigration is a huge chunk of that. And there's people who agree with me because they realize you're right. But don't let the federal government do all these mass arrests immediately, because they could just sweep you up and assume you're an illegal immigrant. Treat you like a number. And the local sheriffs have that power to tell the feds to butt out. And don't get me wrong, I'm not crazy about sanctuary cities myself. But one of the areas you got to look at, immigration originally was the state's obligations. Naturalization was the feds' duties under Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution. Don't fall for the hype on these so-called wars, drugs, terror, literacy, poverty, and illegal immigration, because we can all get sucked in. One of the areas we gotta focus on is why do we have to be an empire? Foreign policies are lousy. That's why a lot of people are flocking over here. The Monroe Doctrine of 1820 is a good stuff to read. And don't defend these people. I'm tired of people defending. It doesn't matter who's in there, whether President Trump or Barack Obama. It doesn't matter. All these folks are looking for a Lord and Savior. Let's have these rallies and go, hallelujah. My God is here. Come on. When people talked about that, I just started laughing. So how many times are you gonna lick each shoe? Oh man. Well, one of the areas we gotta do, folks, honor our Bill of Rights culture, period. And don't get me wrong, they say illegal immigrants don't have rights or immigrants don't have rights. Yes, they do. It's called the rule of law, not a democracy. And both sides of the coin, regardless of Democrats or Republicans, and all these other political parties, love to use that word, trying to condition us like Pablo's dogs. I'll tell you this. Support a republic, not an empire, nor a corporation. It's time for every state and municipality in this country to denounce those last two I aforementioned. And that is it. I thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share us throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or me said something interesting I want to check out, whatever you do, please share correspondence with decorum. In addition, I will leave all my footnotes, including social media sites and email addresses, on my Spreaker page. Once again, thank you for your time. But always remember that the demoniac resistance is how the blue soul can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading love. And may your guardian spirits be with you.